Blah, blah, blah. Hey YouTube, it's been a minute. Well, figured I'd post a video up here. I get requests just about every day of people calling to check up and say, hey, what's going on with the car? Why did you do this? Why did you do that? Can you provide information on it, etc. So I figured I would make this video as the start of a few more, kind of going over what happened to the car, what's been done to it now, and what's going to happen going forward. As you can see, still got her, don't plan on getting rid of her, but it is running a completely different setup on the engine. Biggest thing I hear every day is why did you leave the M112 blower kit? Well, to start off with that, I guess I'm just not a fan. The kit can make power. I don't knock that. But the problem with it is that it is a dangerous kit to run, in the sense that you have to pay a lot of attention to what you're doing when you're driving that car. You can't just get in it and drive like a normal car, turnkey, just beat on it all day. And in my opinion, I feel like that just makes it more of a headache than it's worth, on top of having to like cut the hood and all that other stuff. So I do get people asking in the comments all the time, like, can you send me specs on the plate that you use to make the blower kit, etc. Sorry guys, I don't endorse it, and honestly it's not my mental property. I got help from one of the original creator of it on some of the dimensions for my plate, and it's just not my information to give out. And like I said, I'm just not a fan. I get heat for it because some people are firm believers in it, but it is what it is. But going forward, what's been done to the car? Well, you may not notice now, but bumper's actually kind of messed up. Car's been down for a good while, but got hit. I was at a car meet, and guy in a Genesis coupe, of course, you know how it is. But anyways, guy in a Genesis coupe started his car in first gear behind me, gave me a nice little love tap. That hole right there is where his tow hook went through. But that's all in the works. The reason I have not fixed that yet, that happened over 2 years ago actually. The reason why that has not been fixed is because I've been doing a lot of mechanical work on the car, and I don't want to have it need to be, I don't want to have to work around fresh body work. Okay guys, I'm back. So that was an interesting little cut there. My neighbor was actually coming out doing the walk of shame after a night of partying, so yeah. But anyways, to get back on my point, I don't plan on working on the body work at all until I finish all the mechanical work, which for the most part it's about done. I'm getting real close. The car has been running and driving. It's actually been on a dyno already. It's tuned. However, I do plan to up the boost on it and retune it, and I've been making a bunch of tweaks and general cleanup as I go. But I guess I'll start by going over that with you and take you on a little tour of the car. Alright guys, here she is. So as you can see, probably looks a little bit different from my old videos. Ironically, right there's trusty old reliable or unreliable sitting on the wall from the M112 kit. If you ever wanted to know what one looks like up close, I guess I'll take you over and show you. Basically, it's just a box. Mine was a little bit different from the original because it had a slanted front and a little bit thicker bottom plate. But that's about it as far as dimensional differences. And then I ran bolts, basically like studs for even torque. But there you go. That's what I ran for 3 years. All right. So what am I running now? The blower is a M90 Eaton off of a Thunderbird Super Coupe. When I first got it, I decided to rebuild it and just kind of do a general cleanup, but the specs on it are still stock and everything. It's not like ported or anything like that. And then I just painted it. But this kit runs air to air, just like you would think of on a Pro Charger setup or a turbo setup. Runs a Windstar intake manifold, and I'll go over the specifics here in just a second. But yeah, there's only 2 kits of this out there. There's the original, and then there's my kit. I actually bought a kit from the guy that originally made the first kit, but to put it lightly, it was not up to standard, and what I was sent was not usable pieces. So at this point, I decided to make my own from scratch. The only thing that I have reused is the bracket that actually holds the supercharger. So everything else was made in-house here. But to show you a little bit of how it works, the intake is on the back of the blower. It circulates up through the top here, and then this is a bypass valve off a Mini Cooper, and just recirculates just like you would think of a wastegate on a turbo, and then goes down into the fender where I have a 3.5-inch core intercooler. I'm also running a blow-off valve. You probably can't see it up in there, but it's on 3 blow-off valve. And then pipes run around, circulate back up. You will notice that this pipe is missing. That is because it's down at the welder right now getting a bung welded on. But it would have been on already, but we ended up melting the first bung. We got it a little too hot and messed up the threads. So it was going to be for an air temperature sensor, which I'll go over here in a second. But then it circulates back up to the engine. And then this may be a little bit odd of a throttle body setup that you may not have seen before. There's not, I think there's maybe one that was kind of thrown together other than this one. But ultimately what I used was a 94 to 95 SN95 GT throttle body. This one is just the standard like SR performance jazz that you get on American Muscle. It's good quality, I'll vouch. But the reason I did that was because a lot of guys, when they run this intake manifold setup, they do either the throttle body, or sorry, the idle air control valve. They'll run it either up top, or they'll like run a bunch of hoses to it and like tap them into weird places. Now, the reason I don't recommend that is the longer the airway you have between that sensor or that actuator valve, the harder it's going to be to equalize and normalize the air going through it. So what tends to happen is it'll give you like rough idle and things like that, and honestly I think it just looks a lot cleaner. And then the only thing that I had to do to make this work properly was, of course, I made the little bracket for the throttle cable and this sandwich plate right here. So basically the only thing about the sandwich plate that makes it special is it's got a little bit tapered hole so that the ports match with a smooth transition for airflow. And then it has a different set of bolt holes on each side, because you may notice that they're offset from each other. So it makes it bolt right up. As far as mounting the blower, all it is a bracket that suspends it above the valve cover. It bolts into the same factory holes that the AC compressor was mounted to, and then I made a little idler here so that it gets a little bit better belt wrap on the blower. It does run the standard 6-rib belt, so it just has one less on the supercharger because the Super Coupe came with a thicker belt. And I haven't had any slippage issues. Currently on stock crank pulley and stock blower pulley, the car makes 7 pounds of boost. I plan to run a good bit more. And I will finish by saying this is a stock internal engine. The motor has roughly 120,000 miles on it at this point. It was parked running with the old blower on it, never broke, and it was started up running, still hasn't broke. It's a stout motor. They handle well as long as you don't push it past its limits. For the past year and a half, I've been doing a lot of cleanup on this car. The biggest thing for me has been sun damage. The reason being is when I had the M112 kit, it didn't have a hood. You have to either cut the hood, and I didn't want to cut the factory hood, so I got a Cobra R hood, which I will preface by saying if you plan on doing the M112 hood, it will still need to be cut. It will not need to be cut as much, but it will need to be cut. There's no way around it. The effect of this caused a lot of sun damage in places, particularly on like plastics and stuff. So I've been doing a lot of cleanup. All the accessory drive is now powder coated. That's not rattle can paint. And then I've just been doing little things like new plastics, window panel and everything, or sorry, header panel, that's what it's called. But she's slowly but surely getting there. And the rest will be cleaned up here, but I didn't want to make it too pretty until I knew it ran. Because when you make it pretty, it just makes it harder to take apart. But actually this weekend I just got the bumper back on because I had to shorten the intercooler pipes. I know you may notice that doesn't look like it fits very well. That's actually just because it's not fully bolted in yet, but it fits pretty nice when it's actually tightened down. The next plans for the car. I will be following up on this. I will be making videos, but ultimately this car, outside of the engine, is pretty stock for the most part. The interior is bone stock. It's an automatic 4R70W transmission. Still got the vintage head unit with aux only from when I was in high school. And then the rear end is still the 7.5 one-wheel peel that you see on any other V6. What's going to happen with that? Well, the transmission is going to get swapped. That's last on the list though, because that is not the weakest point of this car. At this point, the rear end is the weakest point of this car. I have sourced a low-mile independent rear suspension out of a Terminator. I've actually got the axle sitting under that toolbox right now. But that is what's going to be going in it. It's got a full tilt boogie kit. Or well, it doesn't have one yet. I'm going to be putting it in it. But all those parts are already sourced. And then as far as the rear end goes, I'm probably going to leave it there for the most part. This isn't a drag car. This isn't a road race car. This is a all-around car. I want this car to run like a car you would expect to see from the factory. Something you can just get in, drive, and it just handles well, it goes well, etc. I want it to be no headache. So as far as the transmission goes, I don't think that this has been done. I could be wrong. But as to my knowledge, there is no one out there has done it yet in this platform. But ultimately, you may be familiar with the BMW 8 HP ZF transmission. Actually, it's in that car. But ultimately, it's not a dual clutch. It is a torque converter transmission, but it's 8-speed with paddle shifters. I do plan to be hooking that up to this car. I at first was planning on a 6-speed T56, but after doing a little more growing and learning in life, it's not that I just want an automatic, it's that I am fascinated by the efficiency and power delivery of that transmission. So I plan to run a standalone transmission controller for it, and this will probably be the first new Edge you've ever seen with paddle shifters. But that's a little update of what's been happening with the car. If you guys would like to see any more questions answered in my future videos, feel free. I will be making more videos. I know it's been a while, but ultimately I was in the middle of college when I started making videos and went through a lot of life changes, got started with my career, and you know, life happens and you have to catch up. But the good news for that is now that I got a big boy job, that means big boy mods. So a lot more for you guys to watch. And lastly, I figured I would answer a couple questions about the car now. The typical questions that I get asked in the forums and things like that that will, I guess, clear the air and put your minds at ease. But anyways, how much power does it make? That is usually the first question I get. Well, to give you reference, the first dyno run that this car did stock was 156 horsepower to the wheel. That may sound like very low to you guys. I don't believe in talking about crank horsepower numbers. I believe in talking about wheel horsepower numbers. I don't measure my wiener from the back of my balls. I don't feel like measuring horsepower that I can't use. But anyways, car made 156 horsepower on 7 pounds of boost. This car with this setup is now sitting at 270 to the wheel. So that's roughly 120 horsepower gain from 7 pounds. My end goal for this car is 12 pounds. So hopefully we can get above 350. If we can hit 400, I'll be super happy. But I don't know yet. It's a stock internal engine, so I want to stay within reasonable limits, and I don't want to overwork certain parts just to hit a number. If anything, I may need to put a better blower unit on it, like a Magnum Powers or something like that. It just depends what the max is for this blower on this particular setup. I don't think anyone really knows yet. It really hasn't been done. But anyways, the Windstar setup. A lot of people, even for a general Mustang, they ask, how do you do a Windstar setup? Well, you can find it in a roughly 2099 year model Windstar. It's pretty much a direct bolt-on. As far as mounting the coil pack, I didn't have to make any fancy custom brackets. All it is a straight piece of aluminum 1-inch stock from Lowe's going straight across, and then cut like a 3-inch piece going down in a T shape. And then I just put bolt holes in it. Looks pretty clean, doesn't it? Other than that, I just blocked off the IAC plate, filled in that hole with a little bit of JB Weld. I know I need to clean that up, doesn't look great. I converted to studs as well for the motor. I ran into an issue where if you want to constantly take this off, it's kind of soft aluminum on that lower intake, so I recommend converting to studs. I just went to a local hardware supply and just asked for some steel rod cut to length, and it worked great. As far as the plate goes, you can run your original Mustang throttle body. I chose not to because I'm kind of an overachiever in that regard. I wanted it to be clean, look nice, etc. And then all you got to do is make a bracket for the throttle body. This is my rendition of it. You will need a little bit of support on the underside here, just a little triangle piece. I honestly would recommend putting another piece up here. I'm probably going to, because it wants to flex a little bit, but I haven't had any issues out of it bending or anything like that. As far as the cruise control goes, you may notice that that is a little close. The throttle works perfectly. The cruise control doesn't have enough cable to function the way it needs to. On the Mustang throttle bodies for this particular generation, it's not really that much of an issue as long as you make the bracket to the correct length. But that's the trade-off for mine. I'm probably going to redesign it at some point to do that, but at this point in time, cruise control is not the first on my list. And nothing's broken as a result of it. Everything works fine other than the fact that that cable is too short to make the cruise control work properly. Another question I get, what is done to support this as far as fuel? Well, the first thing I would recommend to anybody is going with Cobra 39-pound injectors. They are basically direct plug and play. They will maybe need a little bit of file work just for the little C-clip that holds them in place to make it fit just right, but they require next to no effort to install them. I get a lot of people that try to work around this. There's a particular YouTuber that I've been butting heads with a little bit because I won't go into detail, but he thought he was he thought he could get by doing it wrong, and now it's caused him more headache than help. So I would recommend just going with any injector that is made for like a Cobra or similar. It's direct plug and play. I will say do not run while the car is not tuned for it though. As far as a fuel pump, you can put in a bigger fuel pump, but if you add injectors, they will pump more fuel versus using what it needs, and it will flood the car. So I do not recommend driving with new injectors unless it is tuned for it. As far as the fuel pump goes, it is an Aeromotive 320 Stealth pump. It is direct plug and play. The only thing I will recommend anytime you replace a fuel pump on these cars is replace the fuel hose that goes from the pump to the hat with corrugated plastic fuel line. The reason for this is there is a little snap down fitting that pops on the nipple that is on the top of the fuel pump, and it will tend to seep pressure out within the tank. So you'll notice that when you get on a dyno or you're tuning the car and you're looking at your fuel pressure, it'll meet the pressure that you need, but when you go to get into throttle and you go to do a pull, all of a sudden you'll see your fuel pressure start dropping, and it's not holding fuel pressure, and that's because it is seeping out pressure in the tank. Other than that, I would recommend drilling a small hole in the bottom of the basket on the front side of it so that the basket can fill up quicker. But other than that, you shouldn't really have any issues. Everything else is plug and play. You do not have to further modify the fuel system. Well, that's all I got about time for today. However, I will be following up with more videos. If there was any information in here that you thought you could benefit from, great. If you have any more questions that you feel like I didn't answer, please feel free to list them in the comments. I will go over them in the next video. I'm not one of those guys that's going to upload every week, but I will try to be consistent. This isn't my first job, so I work with the time that I have. But until then, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you guys got something out of it, and happy building. Yeah.